Thanks very much. Yes, so this topic is going to be autism and coping with death and loss, and I'm going to go into some of the different areas of autism, different information processing challenges that are related, obviously, to the topic. So the things I'm going to look at today are alexithymia, language processing, social emotional agnosia, visual verbal agnosia, sensory perceptual challenges, and mentalizing. And this is all in relation to how someone on the autism spectrum copes and deals with, and most importantly, processes and internalizes death and loss. So if we look at alexithymia and the complexities around losing someone, a loved one, a family member, a friend, a partner, there could be delays in self-emotional states. So feelings about what is happening could be greatly delayed. There could also be delays in self-emotional awareness. So how they feel about the situation, how they feel about that person not being around anymore, how they feel about the impact, the interpersonal impact, the social impact it's going to have on their lives and the significant others around them. And this may be to do with monotrack systems. So not necessarily living in a multi-track system means that you can do one or the other, not a multi-system approach where you've got different systems that you are reasonably self-aware of at all times, even if not on a conscious level, but certainly on an unconscious one. So if we look at the issues around death and loss, there's going to be processing, so processing the situation, and then finally recognition. Alexithymia is important in terms of context, but also the condition, because it has around an 80% crossover with people diagnosed on the autism spectrum. So, for example, the person may not become self-aware of their thoughts and feelings about this significance until much, much later. And how long could that be? It could be months later. It could be years later in terms of the singular event and how the person feels about it. So it's almost like if you imagine an old computer with a very, very old hard drive, and the significant death and loss is a huge file to download into the system. It will take for some people, ages. And what it can be misconstrued as or misunderstood as is a lack of empathy, a lack of feeling, but what it isn't that. What it is a delay, a perceptual delay, a social emotional delay, but not a lack thereof emotion, not a lack thereof empathy. Language processing disorders, different levels of meaning deafness. It could range from, someone who's significantly meaning deaf, where they're not living necessarily in the system of interpretation, but in the system of sensing, which I'll go on to later, and processing of information around death and loss with language may be very difficult to internalize. So you may have problems with and challenges with internalizing what this means. So there may be a surface recognition. They may give you responses which may be false positives, let's say hypothetically, where the person appears to be aware of what's going on, appears to be aware of what is being said to them, but there may be gaps in knowledge. So language is extremely important, and the type of language you use. With language comes internalization, internalizing, like water in a sponge, and then connected extraction. So it follows a very important process, in the sense that when you look at language, it's important to work with the person's fruit salad, understand language, the language that they can understand. This is not to do with a lack of intelligence or a lack of cognition. This is about tailoring language, understanding the delays in language processing, understanding that there may be gaps in language or pre-attentive thought, where they do on an unconscious level take in the information, but then it comes out later. So meaning deafness can have a massive impact on not necessarily unconscious awareness of what's going on, because the emotions and all the feelings are going in, but the conscious element of it. When we look at social emotional agnosia, it's processing the facts of the event. So these people may well tend to be literal and have a literal perception, social perception of the world. So may need a structured way of filtering the information. So factual perception is crucial. Again, this can be misconstrued as someone being cold, someone who may not be emotionally connected to the event. However, if one presents facts in an emotional way, or more accurately, tailors emotions as facts, maybe one could have lists, pictures, the written word, etc. It gives the person time to filter the information in a way which they can access, and thus have the ability to connect. And actually, through the whole speech, through the whole presentation, it's about understanding the inner mechanics of the ability to connect all these different pieces of significance for the person, which may take time and they will do in their own way. So there has to, I suppose, in some ways, however difficult it may be, and that's got to be taken into account as well. An acceptance that the person is rolling information processing wise in a particular way, and you cannot force or ensue a foreign system. And what I mean by foreign, a system that feels alien or too away from their learning, personality, processes. And if the further away you go, the less likely it may help. So it's about working parallel with the system and understanding how to support, empathize, and give the information in a connected way, which gives the person in turn the safety to grieve and to open up in a way which they are comfortable. When we look at visual verbal agnosia, this person may struggle with written information. They may struggle to create a connection between what is being written, the semantics, and how they feel. So it's a filtering of information. So this fruit salad, the person may actually struggle with lists, struggle with bulks of information. They may well, and I've worked with people echolalically, read off reams of information. But when one tries to strike the conscious mind, it may be very difficult for them to actually create the connection. Hence what I said about monotrack systems. So going from verbalizing what is on a piece of paper to actually switching to answering a question is using two different systems, or you're switching from one to the other. They've extracted and they cannot receive. So you've got also a challenge around social perception and self and other. So all self, no other, all other, no self. So the crossover there. So filtering information may be a challenge from a written perspective. So what can you use? Some people may have a more tactile, kinesthetic association with the loved one. Some people may garner things from pictures. Some people may find pictures extremely comforting. But in a contradictory way, also extremely terrifying, because it's a duality. The pictures may give one comfort, but at the same time, the stark reality that is the past and they're not here anymore. So when we look at objects of reference, let's think about clothes. Let's think about hair. Think about how that person is going to say their last goodbye. It's the ability to connect in a meaningful way in which the person feels able to use their systems to actually garner a sense of closure, a sense of harmony, if that is the right word, and a sense that they are like other family members, being allowed to grieve in a certain way that gives them a sense of being and belonging. It's also very philosophical as well. It's not just about the structure of the information processing, it's about the emotion, the philosophy, and giving the person the avenues to connect in ways that are meaningful. When we look at sensory perceptual challenges, maybe the person is object, meaning, or face blind, have a kinesthetic associative learning style, and living in a system sensitive. So what that means is if they've got severe visual perceptual challenges, maybe pictures do not work in the same way that they may do for other people. They don't instantly create that connection. So this person may need other ways of internalizing what's going on. So again, it's about filtering information in a way that's appropriate for the person. So it may be touch, taste, sound, smell, movement. I'm going to give you a stark example, and I'm going to warn you it might be distressing, but it gives an idea of how this worked for me when my Grant died in 2017. We all wanted to go to the Chapel of Rest, where obviously he was. We were going to see him physically for the last time. And I kind of knew, maybe more on an unconscious level, that it wasn't enough just to see him or bow my head or do something like that. It was much more than that, and I've touched him, stroked his hair, touched his face, as a way, a symbolism of goodbye, but also it was a symbolism of love and care, but it was using my system, the ability to connect, the ability to get some sort of closure, some sort of remembrance, and also some sort of comfort afterwards that I done the right thing within my own system. So maybe that gives you an example of, from a personal perspective, how it's important to get these systems right, or as accurate as possible. And if someone is living in the system of sensing as opposed to interpretation, so that means they may have language that is more idiosyncratic and more pattern, theme, and feel language. It may be that they come out with echolalia, gambits that are their way potentially of connecting with the situation around them. And I have done a speech on the system of sensing in more detail. So in essence, it is about, and I know I'm repeating this, but it's imperative because of what's going on, that the systems are understood. So just to finish, because the last part is mentalizing, and it fits in with these different systems. Mentalizing is the ability to build up internal structures in your mind and make sense of them. So if a person on the spectrum dealing with grief, dealing with death, dealing with loss, which is a normal part of human existence, I think the problem is when you make it culturally abnormal, culturally wrong, culturally scary, that it causes, not just for people on the spectrum, but people in general, a real issue around death. I would go as far to say that there are other cultures that deal and manage with death in a more healthy way. I hark to the Native Americans or the Aborigines of Australia and Africa. They have a far more balanced, more nuanced way of looking at death as a normal part of life. So I think the broader perspective is the environment in which the person is in. What patterns are they picking up about death and illness and grief and loss? What associations are they making? Is it wrong to feel a certain way when someone passes? Is it right to feel a certain way when someone passes? So that's an extremely important factor when you bring all these different challenges together. It's ultimately about knowledge, understanding, but also being objective and self-reflective enough to analyze your environment and analyze to the audience your own challenges, maybe patterns of thinking that have gone down from generation to generation about what death means. Because I think personally that death should be taught alongside sex education, because we talk a lot about life and the creation of life, and I don't see how we should negate or ignore end of life. Also, we talk about the care, don't we, of the nurture we give babies and children. Well, shouldn't that care be transitioned or echoed if you are ill or if you are elderly? It's a cultural thing, effectively. So there's a whole load of other factors which underpin the very topic we're talking about today. So I hope that's giving you some ideas of the different challenges that may be faced around grief and loss. I don't know if the right word is enjoyed this speech, but I hope you've been informed, and I will now pass over to questions and answers. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. I'm just going to stop the recording.